So, hi again, everyone. It's great to see you all this evening. I wanted to talk about something called the Fetters, which you may or may not be familiar with. It's a common teaching, and the Fetters are in Buddhism, the fetters are those things that attach us to suffering. In common parlance, fetters are things that keep us stuck to others, like yoke or something that confines us physically so that we can't move around. So in Buddhism, when we talk about fetters, are those things that keep us attached to the present, not the present, but caught up in greed, caught up in aversion, that keep us caught up in stress and suffering, and in this cycle of rebirth and death and over and over and over again. And so in the Buddhist teachings, in order to become enlightened, we have to let go of these fetters. And they're mentioned a lot in the different suttas, especially in the Theravada, in the Pali Canon. They're mentioned in a number of different suttas. And although there's a list, they're not all the same list. Although they kind of encompass the same ideas, they're different takes on like greed and different takes on aversion and delusion. There are a lot of another ones they deal with greed and anger and restlessness and ignorance and jealousy. So all those things that get in our way, that can be all traced back to greed and craving and not wanting and just totally being blind to what's going on in the world. But there are three that are kind of common to the list, and they are, so those are actually the ones I want to talk about this evening. They are belief in a self, in a fixed self, Sakya Ditti. I'll talk about that. There's doubt, and then there's attachment to rites and rituals. And I'll get more into these as in the talk. And these also in the teaching about the path to enlightenment in Theravada canon, there are these ways to get to enlightenment. And the first entry is called stream entry, when you are jumping into the stream, so to speak, on your way to. And when you are a stream enterer, you end up in it as an arahant, which means fully enlightened. But when you are first on deeply in this path as a stream enterer, you lose these first three fetters of belief in a self, doubt, and attachment to rites and rituals. So that is, once you have lost those, then you're on your way. And then you begin to lose craving, lose aversion. That comes later. But really, first and foremost is this doubt, self, and rites and rituals. And so that's why they're really important to investigate and see how they show up in your lives, in my life, because they can be really subtle. They can be very, 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 very subtle, as all of these teachings are. There's the big ones that the low-hanging fruit, and then there's the subtleties of like, wow, I had no idea that's what that was. So that's what I want to look at. There's one other list of fetters, which are more aimed at the householder, and they kind of are consistent with the precepts, like not taking a life, not stealing, being wise with your speech. They fall in with the sila, the ethical behavior factor pieces of the Eightfold Path. So what are we talking about when we are talking about this idea of a belief in self, which is a fetter? This idea of a fixed self. And when what they're talking about here, what the Buddha is talking about is this idea that there is this fixed essence that is always present, that there is this Mary, this soul, if you want to call it that, or something, this essence that doesn't change, that's in you, that's in each of us, that moves because of the teaching around rebirth, that goes from one life to another. And that's, the Buddha says, that's not true, that's not what's real. And in the history, in the Buddha's time, the teaching, the Brahmins were teaching, in the Hindu teachings, they were teaching that there was this essence, this Atman, that traveled from one birth to the next. It was basically, what is it? I heard someone say, or I read it, where it's just, you just put on a new set of clothes. It's this essence, and all you do is change clothes with each rebirth. And the Buddha says that's not true. There is no intrinsic reality. Instead, we're this complex of changing factors, and everything is dynamic in relation to everything else. That's that teaching of, because of this arises. I mean, if my mom and dad hadn't met, I wouldn't be here. If I hadn't, my brother hadn't sent me a plane ticket in New York when I was 18 to move to California, I probably wouldn't be with you in this little mosaic this evening. If this hadn't happened, then that wouldn't have happened. If this, then; if not this, then not then that. So that is what the Buddha taught, that it's this conditioning, these factors of one thing leading to another, and if we cling, and if we hold on, then it'll take us in this direction. If we can let go, it'll take us in that direction. So this realization that there's not that everything is shifting, everything is impermanent, everything's always changing, is a key teaching that we let go of when we're moving into stream entry, when we begin to see is like, oh, it is all shifting and changing. And being comfortable with that shifting and changing is really important. It is uncomfortable to have the ground shifting beneath you, but it is always shifting. It's just the mind that is creating this idea of solidity, that wants something to hold on to. And the Buddha said, nah, it's going to shift, it's going to change. So there's nothing to hold on to. And I'll tell a story in a little bit about this, but I want to move on with what these other things are as well. The next one is doubt. And it's not so much, well, it's doubt as far as the teachings are concerned. It's doubt as far as your ability to practice, your ability to actually do this deal. If you've ever said, I can't do this, that's doubt. I'm not good at this, that's doubt. Who am I trying to kid? That's doubt. It's, Analio said, it's a mental obstruction in regard to the development of tranquility and liberating insight. So doubt gets in our way. It's one of the hindrances. Instead of just moving forward and taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, taking refuge in the idea that this man, Siddhartha Gautama, could find enlightenment by sitting down and really bringing in awareness to his experience and letting go of wanting things to be a certain way, letting go of attachment, then having faith in that he did it, therefore I can do it. That's the opposite of doubt. So when we're like, not me, that gets in the way. Doubt is this inability to move in a particular direction. The way the Buddha taught at least in the Pali Canon and the way the Theravadas believe, Theravada practitioners believe, is, or my interpretation of this is, the Buddha said, do it. I wouldn't tell you to do it if I didn't think it could be done. So here is the path, and the path supports you in the movement towards liberation, this eightfold path. And I have found, which is taking refuge in the Dharma, taking refuge in the teachings. So I have much less doubt than I used to, because I say, what would the Buddha do? What does the Eightfold Path say in this? All right, what's the path of not causing harm? What's the path of wise speech? What's the intention here? Am I clinging to something? Am I driven by fear? Or can I just open to what is? So there's this investigation of our movement towards or away from suffering, which supports this letting go of doubt. We may not know what the answer is. We may not see any outcome, because we can't. We can't tell the future, but we can see the next thing to do based on this teaching, based on this support. Sometimes it takes a while, especially when we're in our life going, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? But we kind of hold this in, hopefully take refuge in the Sangha, take refuge in a community of people also practicing this, who we can talk to and move through our lives with. So it's this taking refuge which supports the letting go of this doubt, this wavering of the mind. We land in the Four Truths, the Four Noble Truths, and the Eightfold Path. And in fact, faith is one of the first, five spiritual faculties. Trust. If faith is a key word for you, trust. So trust is also letting go of doubt. So having no doubt is necessary for enlightenment. If you're like, is this really going to happen? You're probably not going to get there. So that's the second one. And then being stuck on rites and rituals, this attachment to rites and rituals. In one way to look at that, and a very common way to look at that is, people who practice a lot of ritual, in bowing and chanting, let's say, or lighting candles, or whatever the ritual is. But it's also in this sense, it also means people who are stuck on the teachings without an actual understanding of the teachings, kind of just seeing the precepts as a do it just because I said to do it, but not seeing the reality of, oh, this will actually benefit all beings. It will benefit me. It will not cause harm. I'm doing it because of the interconnectedness of it. It's an experiential view of this practice rather than a mechanical view of this practice. And I'm sure you've all seen it. I mean, in Buddhism, it exists. In all religions, it exists. People who just go through the motions, but there's no real understanding. There's no real living it. It's talking the talk, but not walking the walk. So it's really an understanding of why things are done rather than just doing them blindly cause. And it's also it's a lack of rigidity, which is incredibly important. It's this ability to be in the moment, this equanimity, this ease. And again, the historical perspective is very helpful. In the Buddha's day, the Brahmins thought that if a particular ritual was done exactly perfectly, I mean, if all the steps were done perfectly, then the gods could not refuse to do what was asked of them. So if you did what, the ritual and nothing happened, it was obviously something you did. So there's this real attachment to ritual because of that need, that desire for a particular outcome. So watching that is really important. It's like in some areas, there's this idea of merit. If I do, it was like, well, which always reminded me of the Catholic tradition of, if you say enough Hail Marys, you'll get you'll get into heaven sooner. I remember that when, and that's indulgences was one of the things that, and this was like medieval, but it was still happening when I was growing up. And if you say X number of Hail Marys and Our Fathers, you'll get so many years cut off your time in purgatory. And I was like, really? But yeah, really. So anyway, that's an adherence to rite and ritual. It's like when I was born, my mother was 47 years old. And so she was like, and back in the day, a lot of women were not 47 having kids. And so she prayed to Mary, Our Lady, and said, if my child is healthy and it's a girl, I'm going to name her Mary. And she had some medieval ceremony done, and I was dedicated to Mary, and I wore blue and white for the first 7 years of my life. But I ain't going to hell. I am saved. That's a ritual. I know, right? That's awesome. I couldn't find it written anywhere. I asked a lot of priests, and rarely any of them knew what I was talking about. One vaguely had an idea, so I don't know exactly the parameters. Like if I kill somebody, is that all bets are off? But I'm not intending to kill anyone, so just in case Catholics have it, I'm good. So that's an adherence to a rite and a ritual. You do this and you get this result. So watching that's one, if we can let go of that, that's an attachment, that's a craving, that's a desire. This is going to do this, so that happens, instead of really embodying the teachings and saying, this is a way to live that is letting go, that is in harmony with everyone else and not caught up in craving. So if you can let go of this idea of a fixed self, this essence, this idea, I like to think of it as taking birth as something. You see something in a store window and you want it. You have taken birth as a person who wants that particular thing. It's a way to look at it when something moves into your mind. Doubt, if you can let go of doubt and trust and have faith, and watch how attached you are to particular things. I think there's a flavor of spiritual bypass in this third one of rites and rituals, and it's like, no, this is the way it is, and if you think otherwise or have a different kind of opinion, you're wrong. So that gets into dogma and fundamentalism and is never very good. So I want to tell a story that some of you have probably heard part of, about this piece of an attachment to self, which I think might be helpful, because this is a teaching that people can very often be confused about. And this is kind of my experience with it. I grew up and I never knew what I wanted to be growing up, but I always liked archaeology. In fact, I dressed my Barbie doll up as a cave person and had her play with dinosaurs because I just so anyway, that I was always interested in that stuff. So when I went to college, I studied anthropology, archaeology, and I graduated and I came down to UCLA and I studied ancient history and archaeology. And so I was on my way to becoming an archaeologist. I went overseas, I excavated, and I didn't have a vision except I really liked it and it was cool. And I got A's in dirt is how I said it. But the problem was I got my master's and I kept going. The problem was I drank too much and I drank my way out of graduate school. So that's what happened to that. So that ended that idea. But I was so attached to that idea that for years I would tell people I used to be an archaeologist. I wanted people to know because it I wanted people to see me in a certain way, especially since I thought it was cool. And 9 times out of 10, people went, "Oh, archaeology, that's cool." And so I was attached to that. Fast forward, I got sober, I got married, blah, 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 blah. But I always kept in contact with my old professor at UCLA. And one time, when we talk about the idea of the fight, flight, or freeze, I'm always the flight person. I would much rather run away than deal with things. And I saw him at some event and I was in one of those running away modes. Something in my life was unsettled, unsatisfactory. And so I wanted to run away. And I said something about running away to Syria because he was still excavating. And he said, "Oh, well, you can't just run away. We'll have to make plans, blah, blah, blah." And like a year and a half later, I get an email from him and he had remembered that. And he invited me to come back to Syria and back to the field for a particular project. And I went, my job allowed it. And I would go back every season. I was so afraid what if they don't invite me back? What if they don't invite me back? I really want this. I really want this. And all of a sudden it was like cool and fun. And people were like, "Wow, that's great." And I was a contract where I was working so I could leave and come back and blah, blah, blah. And then fast forward, I was really getting into formal practice and I did the year to live practice. And this is the part that many of you have heard before because I tell this story a lot, but I did the year to live practice and I decided if I only have a year to live, I'm going to go to Syria. I'm going to spend 2 full months. They're going to stay there the whole season, stay and write a final report and be done and have that on my tombstone or in my obituary that she finished, accomplished, achieved. Another attachment, this means a fixed idea about this means something about me if I do this. And I got to Syria, and the day I got there, I went, "I don't want to be here. I do not want to be here." And it hit me straight up in the head that I was tired of doing that stuff. I liked part of it, but I didn't like a lot of it, of the archaeology and that particular experience I was having, but I didn't know how to let go. And then I got there and it hit me between the eyes. And it was so painful to stay there that season. It was so painful every day. In fact, I looked at my journal because I kept a journal during my year to live and I go and I'm like, oh my God, it was so sad. It just was horrible. But I stayed because my husband was coming at the end of the year and we were going to travel together a little bit around the country. And I'm like, wow, this is not who I am anymore. Fast forward a few months, because that was October, fast forward to the next spring, and they're starting to talk about the season and getting ready to go overseas again. And I was like, I couldn't let go. I couldn't let go. I was like drawn, except I knew it was like, "Mary, you don't want to do this, but I have to, but you don't want to, but I can't let go." And I went back, but I only went back for 3 weeks. I mean, it was my compromise with myself, because how can I tell people I'm not doing that anymore? What would that say about me? I would take that cool factor away out of my life, and that's the only thing I ever had that was cool. I have never been cool in my life, ever, ever, ever. And so this was the only thing, and I was like, that was so hard. I mean, a lot of this stuff I've seen since then, but when I was in the middle of it, it was really painful. How do I let go? I'm not having fun. And in fact, I looked at that journal too. I was 3 weeks I was there, just 3 weeks. And I'm like, I'm like, I had this one line, this is a joke. This is a cosmic joke. What am I doing here? It was like, and it was 110 every day. So that didn't help, but it wasn't the heat so much. But, and I realized, and I had to recognize that I had that idea of who I want. I needed to be this particular thing. I had this fixed idea. It was causes and conditions that came and they went, and can I let go? Can I let go? It was so hard to let go. And then let go of being cool. And then fast forward another couple of years, and I was taking a writing workshop with this woman, Beth Dawn. I was taking a writing workshop with Beth, and I wrote a piece about, this thing and being cool and archaeology. And when it was done, she was giving me notes on what I had written. And she said, it's so funny what you think is cool. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, archaeology. I go, but it is cool. She said, not in my world. So there was this massive attachment to this idea of being cool. And then somebody who I really value their opinion comes along and says, nah, that's not cool. I'm like, ah! I was like, so the pain and the suffering that comes along from being so attached. And that's just one thing in my life. How many other ideas do I have about this sense of I am this? That ego, that taking birth as I am. That's that attachment. And this teaching is about letting go of that sense of I am. Just being. There's no fixed sense, today, this moment I'm doing this moment I'm doing that, but it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. Archaeologist, not archaeologist. Service analyst at Xerox Corporation or not a service analyst at Xerox Corporation. It doesn't matter. Dharma teacher, not a Dharma teacher. It doesn't matter. Wearing the world as a loose garment, I love that idea. Being able to let go of these things. There's so much freedom in that. There's so much freedom of where we're stuck. So this willingness to let go of our grand ideas about shoulds and coulds and woulds. Letting go of doubt. Trusting the path, taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, trusting that. And then actually understanding this path, letting go of doing things just because it's supposed to be done, but actually seeing clearly, that the spiritual unfolding is happening, and that to do these things will lead to liberation, and that we practice in order to achieve this or let go of the fetters, those things that bind us to this world of samsara. In talking about the rites and rituals, there's the teaching of the raft, which many of you know, where we use a raft to get from one shore to the other shore. And then when we get to the other shore, we don't need to drag the raft with us. It served its purpose. And so many things serve their purpose, and we don't have to care just because how many things you do just because you've always done them? How many ideas do you have and you hold on to just because you've always thought that way? Even though reality says this, I'm sticking with this because this says, well, it's supposed to be this way, or this is blah, 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 whatever it is. And you're like, but it's disconnected. It's not firing in the same place. It's something totally over there. Can you open up and see things clearly? Because that's the path to freedom. That's the path to liberation. That's that stream entry where you're just like, whoop. And I was listening to a talk, and this monk was talking about this, and he says once you move into this place of stream entry where you're really on the path, you have that glimpse of the unconditioned, and then when you have that glimpse, that insight, then everything changes. You know that it's your perspective changes, and it's hard to go back. And I'm sure many of you have had those experiences. Once you've seen something differently or clearly, then it's like, oh, I can't go back to thinking the way I used to think. I can't unsee what I've seen. And so once you really drop into this awareness, then you're well on your way to a freedom and a liberation. Whatever your belief around the teachings it's actually quite liberating to move in this direction. I've had little tastes of it, and I'm willing to keep going. I'm willing to keep going. So these are my thoughts on these fetters, these three: belief in a self, doubt, and attachment to rites and rituals. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for your attention.